Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is Saturday morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, and it is March 27th. I'm so happy to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us. We're on for half an hour, and we're still talking about the Survivor to Thriver workbook. We're on page 77, and actually last night I did a show, and we talked about step 4. We kind of went a little bit into step 5, and it's a great workbook for adult survivors of child abuse, and I found it on the actual ASCA support website, and that is at www.ascasupport.org, and it's the Adult Survivors of Child Abuse, a Morris Center program. It's a great website. There's the Survivor to Thriver workbook you can pull up there. It's free, and it's a download. You can download it for yourself and go through it and read the first chapter, especially the safety first, just to make sure that you're in the right place to be doing the workbook. And, they suggest that people who haven't come very far in their healing actually not begin the workbook until they make sure that they are in a safe place to do the workbook, because it's very extensive. It's extensive and intensive. It's 115 pages long, and it really goes through the whole details and dealings of recovering from child abuse as an adult. So, there's lots of ways to be triggered when you're doing this workbook. So if you're just not in a safe enough place, they really suggest that you don't do it on your own. And make sure you have a therapist or counselor or group support. And they suggest their own ASCA support. And that is if you had a ASCA chapter being hosted in your city, then you could actually join the meetings and get involved with those guys. And my city doesn't have one, so unfortunately. But they do have online support groups. They have peer support groups, all kinds of support groups linked on there. So with the ASCA, Adult Survivors of Child Abuse. So that's what we'll be looking at today. And it's not a professional show. This show is not meant to replace professional help. And so I always say that because it's so important. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. I don't have any certificates in those areas. And I'm just a survivor, really, who, I'm finding information. And as I go, I just think it's really important to share it. I also am a child rights advocate. I fight against child abuse and all human rights abuses, really. And I study child rights and human rights, and I'm in between classes right now. I have been for a while at MRU, excuse me, just because I couldn't afford to go anymore because I lost my job and haven't been able to get back to the courses. But I'm still studying because I want to go back and finish my certificate program and then eventually, take some more courses and keep going and end up with some sort of a diploma, we have to be really safe when we're doing this type of thing if you're an adult survivor. But I wanted to cover this stuff because a lot of people who have experienced child abuse and who were abused as children don't have there's no one talking about it, you know what I mean? It's like people just keep it all hidden away, locked away in the closet. No one wants to talk about it. It's all pushed under the carpet. Families don't want to acknowledge it because it's so hurtful and painful. And if the abusing members are still alive, they certainly don't want their secrets out. And silence is the issue. I really believe that silence is the problem with child abuse. Really the main problem is people are abusing their children. But the thing is these people like myself, who experience child abuse, there's no one talking about it. So you just suffer along, and if you don't hear somebody saying, look, you can get help, there's help available, there's lots of survivors out there who are doing it, they're making it, they're living good lives now, and you just have to keep going and reaching out. And I just think there's not enough people who are willing to talk about child abuse. So that's why I just wanted to be one more voice. I know there are some out there doing it, and that's why I thought, I just want to be one more voice, just to add my voice to everybody else and say, look, child abuse has to stop. And I'm a survivor, and I tell you, it's been a long, hard road, and I'm in my 40s now, and it's just been recent, the last few years, that I've been actually able to work through a lot of my abuse issues. And so, it's a long, hard road if you don't reach out and get help. So that's why I always suggest everyone get help. Get a counselor, a therapist, group support. I love group support. And find a good friend, who, if can really support you and back you up. That's the thing. It's hard to find people who are willing to do that, to stay with you the whole time, and who really care and want to see you succeed and have a good and healthy life, right? So that's so important. And if you're young, if you're a young person under the age of 18, I fight for child rights. I believe in online child safety, and we cannot stress it enough. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we fight for child rights and to stop child abuse of all kinds. There's all kinds of sexual predators and just crazy people out there trying to get a hold of kids. So make sure that, if you're a young person, that you have someone listen to this show with you to make sure that they think and feel it's okay for you to listen to it. So important that, I know a lot of times we don't have a parent who actually cares, or is there for us to help us with these things. So if you have a teacher, a counselor at school, a coach or a mentor, someone who really cares about you and you trust them, they could listen to the show with you, even an archive show, and find out if it's okay for you to be listening to this, because the topics of abuse are very sensitive, and people, if you haven't heard a lot about abuse, it could be kind of scary, and so that's why I really, promote that children would talk to someone and get someone to listen to the show with them, just to make a good, decision on whether or not you should be listening. So that's so important, right? Listen at your own discretion. And we'll get started here. We were talking about, we were looking at step 4 yesterday. That was, I shall re-experience each set of memories of the abuse as they surface in mind. We went through that, and that's quite intensive, right? There was a self-help portion and a professional help portion. And then we kind of looked at step 5, and that was, I accept that I was powerless over my abuser's actions, which holds them responsible. Now, this is so important for people who have survived child abuse, because when you're abused as a child, generally people, whoever your abuser was, will generally try to make it look like it was your fault, because they don't want to take responsibility for it, and they want to be able to justify their actions, right? So I know, like, even in my case, my mom especially was was doing that and tried to make it look like it was my fault, that I was so bad that I deserved to be treated that way. How could I, if I was behaving better, she wouldn't have had to do what she did to me. So, and actually I was doing nothing but just maybe sometimes walking in the room, but it was just her way of lashing out and taking her aggression out on me. I was just kind of like a punching bag for a while. And so, I wasn't really doing anything wrong. And so I didn't take on a lot of the blame, but I know it can happen. But what I did do was believe what she said about me, for as far as the verbal abuse went and emotional and psychological abuse. Like, I believed the words that she said to me, which was, I was worthless, I wasn't wanted, I should have been dead, she should have killed me years ago. Those were things I heard on a regular basis. And so, you grow up hearing that, you start feeling worthless and stuff, and low self-esteem develops, and then you start thinking, man, I must be just horrible. And, I knew the abuse really wasn't my fault, but I took on what she told me about myself, and that's how I carried myself into my adult years. And it was hard. It's very hard to get over that. I started to realize, hey, I don't have to believe that stuff. I didn't deserve to be treated that way. And so I started to learn how to place the blame on who it really was belonging to, which was my parents and one of my brothers. So it's so important to realize that, it's not our fault, and that no one deserves abuse. I'm talking, there isn't one person on this planet that deserves to be abused. And so, it's just that abusers, that's how they get to justify what they're doing. And, and if they have mental issues themselves, then quite often they would blame you, of course, right? So we'll get right into step 5, and it's page 77 of the Survivor to Thriver workbook. That is www.ascasupport.org. And you can pull that right up and read right along with me. I'll probably be talking a little bit through it about my own stuff, my own experiences, and things that I've seen and gone through myself. But we'll get right into it, and we have about 20 minutes left. So it says, I accept that I was powerless over my abuser's actions, which holds them responsible. By now, we read some of this last night. By now you know that survivors grow up believing the classic myth of child abuse, that they, not their parents or abusers, were somehow responsible for the abuse. The justifications for this myth are as varied as your imagination is fertile. I let him do it to me. I should have been able to protect myself. These are things that we might say. I should have been able to protect myself, right? I let him do this to me, or I let her do this to me. I liked certain aspects of the abuse, the attention, the gifts, the pleasurable sensations, the sense of being special. This is the psychological damage being done to a child that you carry into your adult life, thinking that, oh, I should have been able to protect myself, or I liked the attention, I liked the gifts, if that was the case. The child's often distorted perceptions of who is responsible are enhanced by the parents' abusers' indictments. Like if your parents said, or your caregiver said, I'm beating you because you were a bad boy or a bad girl. I'm showing you how much I love you, right? I've heard that before. I wouldn't be calling you stupid if you showed me you had, more than half a brain in your head, right? This is things that abusers would tell their children. And also, you have the devil inside of you, and I'm going to beat it out of you. And this is stuff that's kind of commonly heard by children who are abused, right? And I know that I've heard some of that myself. It says these words are truly toxic because they do more than simply and unjustly place the blame for the abuse on your shoulders. They eat away at your positive sense of self, and the lingering messages continue to do so in your adult life. And so it's very psychologically damaging and very emotionally and damaging to a child to hear those things and to be, followed up with physical abuse. It just enforces it. So that's what happened in my case. And, my mom would be beating me, and in the meantime she's telling me I'm worthless and calling me names and, just really horrible, right? And it's not right. And I know so many people have suffered with this, and I just feel my heart is with you. And, we can do it. We deserve a good life. We didn't deserve to be abused. And so, but we have to learn how to see ourselves differently and how to place the blame where it should be placed. And, learn how, like they talk about it right here, I'll just read this. It says, you can challenge those words of your parents' abusers that continue to echo in your mind by coming to understand your dysfunctional family and recognizing the real reasons why you were abused. This is an essential step in recovery because without seeing that your parents or abusers were at fault, you will have difficulty in facing the remaining tasks of recovery, which is directing your anger away from yourself and towards them. Uncovering your shame and understanding how the abuse affects your life today. So most importantly, you need to understand that you were the child and that you had neither the power nor the authority to make your parents or abusers do anything to you. The abuse was their responsibility because, quite simply, they had the greater power and they did it to you. Nothing you could have done would have changed this. Because families and society are set up to give power and authority to parents and adults in general, children have little or no power over their abuse or much of anything else. And so this is just a fact. The abuser is always at fault. Parents have the ability and it's just really, they have to make the right decisions. You know what I mean? So when they're disciplining their children, or they come home after having a bad day, or they have these psychological issues, they have to get help for that. They cannot, it is their fault and their responsibility when they lash out at their children or use their children for whatever purposes and abuse them. Right? It's the parents and caregivers' fault, and it's also the adults' fault who do the abusing. It's not the children's fault. It is never the children's fault, and it couldn't be. Because it's not like the children are saying, oh, here's this, go ahead and beat on me because I was a bad kid. Now, that can happen after psychological damage sets in. But I'm talking initially the very first stage when a parent decides to lash out at their child, whether it's physical, emotional, verbal, psychological, sexual, whatever it is. That very first time, that was up to the parent to make the decision not to do that, not the child. So it's not your fault, and it's not my fault, and it's not any child's fault that they're being abused. We have to really get a good grip on that and place the blame where it really belongs, which is the adult, the caregiver, the parent, or whoever it was in your life that abused you, right? And so I was able to do this, and and I had a lot of hatred in my heart for what they did. And I realized after because I experienced all this for so long, and it just went on and on and on, and I didn't run away, and I kind of stayed with the family and actually tried to help my mom and was trying to be there for her and stuff. And over the years, and by the age of 30, I was just like, I knew what was going on. I was like, this was because my mom was diagnosed manic depressive, and she was in a marriage that she was very unhappy in, and my dad was abusive, and she was very abusive to him. He was abusive to her, and they took their stuff out on their children, right? So, I was able to place the blame where it should have been. But I still had a lot of self-loathing, and that was from being a very young child and hating my body. I hated my mom made me hate myself, and then I experienced some sexual abuse, and that really caused me to hate my body even more. And then I couldn't deal with being a woman, and there was so many issues. It was so hard, and it was not my fault. So I know where to put the blame, and that's great because that at least allows me to get the anger and stuff that was related to the abuse placed on the proper people instead of myself. I wasn't really angry at myself. I was angry at them. So I had a lot of anger in my heart that I really had to work out and in order for it to not kill me and destroy me. But that's where therapy would have come in really handy. And that's why I think, I should have reached out to get help, but I didn't get help, and I didn't trust therapists and counselors and stuff because my parents were kind of brainwashed us all the way through our whole lives saying that, oh, they just want to get a hold of you and then they just want to get your information and use it against you. And I grew up around people who were schizophrenic and paranoid, and my mom was a manic depressive, so you can imagine what our home life was like. And so, these two people were working against each other all the time and also working against their children all the time. And let me tell you, it had some real powerful damage, and it really destroyed our family. So had my parents gotten help, this whole thing would have not happened. So I realized and placed the blame on my parents. Absolutely, I do. So it says here, besides recognizing the reality of who was responsible for the abuse, think about the following realities as well. As a child, you were not psychologically equipped to believe that what your parents' abusers were doing was wrong, and much less speak out about it. Because you are dependent on them for so much, you couldn't risk you were dependent on them for so much, you couldn't risk alienating them by speaking the truth. Even if your child mind was precocious enough to make sense of the complex web of issues that comprises child abuse. Few, if any, children can do this effectively because their intellectual capacities are not sufficiently developed to do so. You desperately wanted to love them and be loved by them. It would have been foolish for you to incur their wrath and dash whatever hope of love, caring, and nurturing you harbored inside. It says, think back to what it would have meant for you, the child, to accept that the people who were supposed to love you were actually hurting you. It's not surprising that few children can face this horrible reality, because to do so would cause them to become emotional orphans in the process, and little could be worse than that. So, I know myself, I knew what they were doing was wrong, and, but I was just so used to it, and that's how I grew up. And when a family decided, I actually went and had a family intervene for me when I was 13 and a half, pretty much 13 and a half, and they said, we will go to the authorities and we will report this abuse, right? And I told them, no, I said, that's just how it is in my family, and I didn't want to leave my family, but the whole reason being is that my mom was threatening to throw me out anyway. And so, but I was the only child that she threatened to do that to. She never threw out my brothers, and they were right in trouble with the law. They were always doing drugs, and I was doing drugs too. But they were really seriously always in a lot of trouble. And she didn't threaten to throw them out, and my sister, she didn't threaten to throw her out. So psychologically, it was very damaging to me that she wanted me out of her life and out of her house. She wanted me dead, really, is what she wanted me. And so, I took that really hard, and I thought, no way, I am not leaving that house. There's no way, because I was not going to be just the only one thrown out. That was my. So when those people asked to step in, I was just determined to stay in that home, and I was determined to be one of those kids. I was like, no way, she's not throwing me out. She didn't throw any of the others out. There were 7 children, and I thought, man, I'm the last baby, and I really was. It was very damaging and very psychologically damaging that she would do that to me. But, she couldn't love me because I was born out of marital rape, right? And she just couldn't stand having to look at me, I think. So, that's difficult, and it wasn't my fault. But I paid the price for it. And so, I should have let them go ahead and remove me from the home and possibly even just move in with that family, because they did allow me to stay with them off and on for about 2 years. So not the whole time. I'd still go home and stuff. But when things would get a little bit tense or tensions would start rising again, I'd just have to call them and they would be over to pick me up, and I could stay with them as long as I needed to. So it was great, and thank God for that family, because I tell you, I got to see a normal family. I got to see how normal families behave. So I really had a little bit of a plus going on there, and it did help a lot. So yeah, it wasn't our fault, and we didn't deserve that, and it is hard to actually acknowledge the abuse. I know there's people in my family that can't. They just don't want to. They just think that it's better if they just go ahead and just carry on these feelings that it never happened, and because in order for them to function without having to actually look at what happened in our family, this way they can just pretend it didn't happen and go on, right? And that's really where my family's at right now. And that's okay. I'm not going to go with it because I believe that truth is everything. Truth is everything in a child abuse case, and truth is everything when it comes to being abused. You either were or you were not abused, and people either abused you or they didn't. And so, truth is everything. And I tell you, I decided, okay, I'm going to speak the truth, whether it hurts my family or not, because I think people need to start talking about it and telling the truth. And so many survivors out there just don't have a voice, And I thought, I want to be a voice to say, hey, child abuse is wrong. It needs to stop. And we, as child abuse survivors, did not deserve that. And so why should we have to cover that in silence and just, be stuck with that for our whole lives and not be able to allow that to come out and to get the truth out to the public, that this is happening. It happens to people all the time, and it's wrong, because I think that's the only way we're going to really stop child abuse, right? This is the only way we're going to be able to make a difference in it, is if it stops being pushed under the carpet and, locked away in a closet somewhere and just forgotten about, right? The only time we ever hear about child abuse is in the news when there's a death, a child's been murdered at the hands of their parents or caregivers, or either that or their child is in the hospital due to abuse-related injuries. Then we hear about it in the paper, but it's a little bit late. It's too late. So we need to make some changes. Society really has to make some changes, and communities have to make changes. People in their own lives have to make changes on how they're going to treat their family, how they're going to treat their children, and how they're going to treat each other as far as partners go, or boyfriend, girlfriend, husbands and wives. It's a huge issue, and it's going to require all of us, right, to stop this thing. So it's actually overwhelming. But there's a self-help portion here, and also a professional help portion. And the self-help portion, this is recommendations that they have for this actual chapter. And they said, write in your journal the words you recall your parents or abusers using to place the burden of responsibility for the abuse on you. What was the tone in their voices, the look in their eyes when they said those words, and what reasons did you adopt to hold yourself responsible for the abuse, right? We're supposed to take a look at it and see what they said, what the abuser said to us, and how, what they look like when they said it, how was their voice, and this way we can really take a look at it and then kind of see what happened and why we would take the blame and why we would accept that responsibility, right? And as a small child, if you hear that over and over again, you very well could believe it, right? I believed what my mom said about me, so it could happen, right? Imagine what you would say to your parents or abusers today about who was responsible. As you speak to them, what feelings do you notice within yourself? And that's kind of important, I think, to think about, what you might say to your parents if you haven't ever, actually talked to them about the abuse and stuff. I talked to both of my parents about the abuse. Actually, I was screaming at them from the time I was about 18 because I thought, you people were responsible for the destruction of this family, and I let them know. And I figured, hey, I'm 18, I can move out or whatever. And I started to let them know how I felt. And really, they didn't care. And my mom, even when I was 30, told me it didn't matter to her and that we didn't matter to her. And I thought, I was like, you got to be kidding me. You just put us through all of this, all of the 7 siblings, through all of this garbage and abuse for no reason, except for the fact that you just needed, for what? You know what I mean? She literally said that we did not matter, we did not count. And to hear that, I think it's just because she was so manically depressed and she was just so down. She couldn't help herself. She had to be abusive, right? It was like the only way she could actually survive or something. I don't know. She was abused as a child, so it was horrible. So yeah. This is the sort of thing, right? I did talk to my parents about it, and they just didn't care. And my dad actually apologized. So, but I don't know how sincere he was. You know what I mean? He still does not take responsibility for my brothers, the way that their lives ended up. 2 of my brothers, one is dead from suicide. He committed suicide at the age of 33. And another brother, he was a cocaine addict. And he had tried to commit suicide before, a few times, but it didn't work, and he was saved. And then the final time, he was 33 years old. And my other brother was a drug addict, and he was homeless, and he actually died of a drug overdose in a shelter here in Calgary, and when he was 43. So, I completely placed the blame on my parents where it should be, because my parents allowed them to use drugs. They didn't try to stop it. My dad was very abusive to my brothers, physically, verbally, emotionally, psychologically, in every way. My mom was also, she was abusive in the way that she actually let them do what they were doing. She let them do the drugs and let them carry on in their destructive behavior to get back at my dad. So she really encouraged it. You know what I mean? So it's horrible. I blame them. I totally do. It says here, sharing your story in ASCA meetings can work to expose myths about child abuse and can bring you much-needed validation for eventually seeing things the way they really were. ASCA meetings are particularly effective in challenging these myths because most of the participants share the oppression born of this misplaced sense of responsibility. And you know, that's the thing, finding a group support, even if it's not the ASCA, which would be great, but even just any survivor, adult survivors of child abuse group, is a really good thing to do, because these people are coming together to really learn how to live, a whole and happy and healthy life. But first, they have to deal with this child abuse, leftovers, right? And so it's so important, because these people want to be healthy and they want to be happy and have good lives, and that's why they're reaching out. So it's so important to reach out and get the help wherever you can find it. If you can't afford a counselor or therapist, get into a group support. They're usually free, and I'm involved in 2 online group support groups, and it's just awesome. It's free, and these people are there and they care. And if you're having a bad day or having a hard time, they tend to know what you're talking about. They've been there and been through it, right? And then they suggest for professional help. They say, what is your therapist's response to the question of responsibility for the abuse? How do you feel about this response? Is it helpful or not? Tell him or her what you feel and discuss what you need from him or her in this regard. So that's quite interesting to see maybe what a therapist would have to sort of, what their response would be to that, right? And some therapists encourage their clients to use the empty chair technique to talk back to their parents or abusers. After years of keeping your feelings and thoughts to yourself, this can be extremely overpowering. It says, however, this technique can also stir up old feelings of being disobedient and fears of being abused again. So if the latter is your experience, explore what your resistance is to addressing your parents or abusers in this safe, controlled way. So, you don't want to regress in the healing, I know that. And we want to move forward in our healing very slowly and just at an even, steady pace. So you want to make sure you're comfortable with these techniques before you try them. And I think, they're talking about professional help here, so that would be something done with a therapist or in a counseling session, right? And it's so important that we don't, try to do stuff on our own that we think we can handle and then find out that we can't. You want to make sure that you're in a good place, right, to do stuff like that. And sometimes they say you can, excuse me, my voice is terrible this morning. They say that we can get a coping list, and we can actually, there's things we can do. We can write a letter to our parents and tell them how we felt, and then just tear the letter up. It allows you to actually put the words down on paper that you would say, and then you don't even have to give it to them. You can just tear it up if you want to. Or you can save it in a box and bring it out and look at it again and see how far you've come in your healing. And say, hey, I'm not as mad as I was, or I'm not as upset, because I know where to place the blame. I know that the anger is directed away from me, and I've had some anger management classes, or, whatever it is that we need, right? And, or, some PTSD, support group stuff. Post-traumatic stress disorder, things like that. And so it's so important, right? We do deserve it. And we can get this help. We just have to keep reaching out, looking for what works for us. We're all different. What works for me might not work for you. And then what worked for you might not work for me, because we're all different. So that's why I say just keep looking until you find that right support for yourself. It's so important. So now, excuse me, I'll be back on tomorrow morning at, I believe, the same time, 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. And we'll continue on with step 6, which is I can respect my shame and anger as a consequence of my abuse, but shall try not to turn it against myself or others. So that's going to be quite interesting to go through. So we'll look at that, and then we'll look at step 7. We might get to that. That says I can sense my inner child whose efforts to survive now can be appreciated, and that I would really like to go through that. Well, my voice is just horrible this morning. So we have about a minute left, and I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. You can go on their website, www.dreamcatchersforabused.children.com, and you can check out, they have all kinds of info there on child abuse, what is child abuse, and all the different kinds of child abuse. Also, how to report child abuse. And there's links there to all kinds of websites for survivors. There's all kinds of great information on there. It's a very healing website. I really That's what drew me to Dream Catchers for Abused Children, was the fact that these two moms on a mission were out there to stop child abuse, and I thought, hey, I want to be part of that. So if you want to be part of that, get a hold of me, get a hold of them on Dream Catchers for Abused Children, www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.org or .com, either one will get you there, and let them know if you want to become a volunteer for Dream Catchers for Abused Children. I'm so happy to stand with them. It's a volunteer position, and I love it. And I tell you, I just want to be one more voice out there to say we need to stop child abuse. It needs to stop now. And so whatever we can do to raise awareness, education, prevention, it's important. We have to do it. These children are counting on us right now. And so, it's in the future children, right? We really have to do this. And so, yeah, I have a book out. It's called The Life of Death, The Redemption. It's at Lulu, and you can contact me if you would like a copy. All proceeds are going to Dream Catchers for Abused Children to help in the mission to stop child abuse. And because I don't want money for that book, I already paid for it. Let me tell you, with every kind of blood, sweat, and tears and everything else you can imagine, that book's been paid for. So, I hope you will pick up a copy and know that money is going to go towards saving children's lives in the future. It's, to stop child abuse. So thanks very much. You can grab a copy from a link here on blogtalkradio.com, or you can just contact me if you'd like to know how to get a hold of my book. Thanks, everybody. Take care. And, my heart is with you. Just keep reaching out. We do count. We do matter. And keep that hope alive, okay? Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.